Welcome to DigitalK.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the CEE region as a whole, startups in the venture landscape. I'm going to look at some of the venture trends in the region. Then we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into Bulgaria and Sofia specifically to see what's going on here locally as it compares to the region and European as a whole. And then finally, we are on a mission to map the entire Bulgarian ecosystem. So I'll share a little bit about at the end how we're doing that. 30 billion. So that's the combined value of Central and European unicorns. As you can see on this chart here, it's mainly concentrated in Estonia, Poland, and Romania. But by all means, the rest of Central and Eastern Europe has some players that could potentially be unicorns as well. On the left here, you see the realized unicorns in the region. In the middle, you see unrealized unicorns, so those that have not exited yet. And then on the right, we've identified what we think are rising stars. So we take several data points and signals and basically predict what companies we think could be the next unicorns here in Central and Eastern Europe. Cool. So this chart depicts, when you think about sort of venture, you think about major markets, you think about UK, Germany, France, sometimes CE gets overlooked. And so what we did here is we broke down the amount of capital over the last 5 years that went into each of these markets. And on the right there is the rest of Europe, right? So some people forget that outside of the UK, France, Sweden, and Germany, there's actually about over 7.5 billion just in the last year of recognized capital that went into Central and Eastern Europe. Cool. 2018 obviously there's two mega rounds, Taxify and City B, which is driving a little bit of this. But if you look again over the last 5 years in this region, the capital has gone up steadily over the last 5 years. 700 million 2018, 300 million 2013. So over doubled over the last 5 years. You can see the distribution in the valuations of the companies that make up this as well. We're going to publish this report in about a week and a half or 2 weeks after this. So we also love feedback. If there's a logo that we missed, if you guys want to be included, let us know, send us an email, tweet at us. We're happy to add some of this to this report before we release it publicly. So what's really interesting, if you see this slide, and now this slide, it's the same slide, but what we've done is we've added a layer on top, if you can see depicted in the yellow there. And that's basically, so you have the 700 million that's gone from the CEE region. You have another 600 million that's basically the companies that started in Central and Eastern Europe and scaled into either North America or UK. And the idea here is really, this is really a global sort of global region, and companies are scaling all over the world, and that capital is going not just in CEE, but it's following founders who started companies here that are growing to North America, that are scaling to the UK. So on the left here, what you see is the medium seed round sizes. We have all of Europe, and then CEE is notated there in blue. And then on the right is you have the medium rounds for all rounds. So seed round median on the left, all round median on the right. The blue is the CEE regions. Bulgaria is highlighted there. So the average funding round specifically in Bulgaria for seed is about 400,000. And the average funding round in total, so all of the rounds in Bulgaria, is about 1 million. And again, this is data from 2013 to 2018 that we've realized. Cool, so now I talked a little bit about CE as a whole, so now I'll talk a little bit about Bulgaria and Sofia, and then we'll sort of start to compare major markets in this region. Cool, so the number 3 tech hub in Central and Eastern Europe. So on the left there you have all the major tech hubs in this part of the world. And in the blue, you basically have all of the rounds that went to that specific city. And then sort of in the white, you have the rounds in totality that went into that country. So what's super interesting is that if you look at Bulgaria, over the last 5 years, 255 rounds came into this country. Of those 255, 246 came into Sofia. So super highly concentrated tech hub that's happening here. And then obviously Warsaw and Tallinn are 1 and 2. So Sofia is not too far behind. We looked at data on a per capita basis in the region. Some of this may not be super surprising, but I think the key takeaway is that there's a ton of upside in terms of the per capita. So looking at sort of Bulgaria as an ecosystem as a whole, we took some data points that we think are pretty interesting, and I'll point out a couple. So 650 startups have been founded here, 85 million invested, 10%, our data show that about 10% of Bulgarian venture-backed startups or scale-ups have at least one female founder. There's about 15,000 startups and scale-ups in Bulgaria, employees that make up startups and scale-ups. And then what I think is the most interesting here is that what our data showed is that about 15% of Bulgarian startups are in the deep tech space. So everybody defines deep tech a little differently, and I'm happy to share how we define it, but it's things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing. And for me personally, I think this is a real opportunity for Sofia and Bulgaria as a whole to capitalize on this. Because if you look at Central and Eastern Europe, no one's really taken claim of being the deep tech capital. And I think that we think that there's something happening here based on the data, and companies that are operating in this space are moving here, and that's super interesting. And I'm just sort of wondering at the local level what can be done to sort of foster this and really grow Sofia as the capital of deep tech. Cool. Most people know this, but one of the things that's driving this region is the tech talent. Here we broke down the tech talent per region in Central and Eastern Europe. On the right, you have the labor force. So out of 100 people in the labor force, what are those that are working in tech? And this is specifically in startups and scale-ups, so not the larger corporates. Cool. So we firmly believe that to build a sort of fully functioning ecosystem, it's not just the venture, it's not just the startups. Those certainly have a big role in it, but it's also the corporates, it's also the R&D in the area, and it's the other stakeholders. It's the local governments, it's economic development agencies, it's the BVCA, it's all these people, and probably some that we missed. And if we missed you, let us know, and we're happy to add you. But we know that it's not just it takes all of these to sort of grow this ecosystem together. Cool. So we looked at sort of what's really interesting is that Sofia and Bulgaria as a whole is extremely diversified in terms of the sectors that it's fostering. So it's everything from, as I mentioned, deep tech to blockchain, as you guys know, to food tech, to fintech, security, health tech, you name it. We found pretty much every sector that exists in Bulgaria, which I think is kind of awesome. Yeah, it means that it's sector agnostic and that it doesn't matter what you do, you can operate a successful company in this part of the world. Cool. So this slide's really interesting, and what we try to depict is, if you look at Bulgarian VCs and Bulgarian startup founders, they really do have a global footprint. So these are companies that were based at one point or started in Bulgaria, and they scaled or moved to other parts of the world, whether it be North America or the UK or elsewhere. But it really is indicative that not just capital is flowing out of here into other countries, but founders are scaling their companies at a global level too, which is also indicative of sort of this globalizing ecosystem here. Cool. So just to kind of sum everything up here, 12 unicorns have been created in Central Eastern Europe with a combined value of about 30 billion. And there's a huge pipeline of rising stars, which we think have the potential to become unicorns or close to unicorns. Sofia is the third largest tech hub in Central and Eastern Europe in terms of the number of funding rounds that have gone into here. 15% of startups in Bulgaria are operating in the deep tech space. Super interesting. Bulgaria is super diversified, right? As a slide I showed you a couple of ago, they're operating in every sector: health tech, fintech, deep tech, et cetera. Again, it's a really indicative that this area is fostering all types of different technology, and that's a really, really good thing. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, we're launching an ecosystem in Bulgaria. It's part of the reason that we're here. So we firmly understand that, particularly in this part of the world, data can be decentralized. And so we're trying to centralize it and create a open source database for startups, for founders, for VCs, for corporates to be able to track all this stuff. Here's a little mock-up of what it's going to look like. But later this summer, we will be launching this. And so for those of you out there that consume data, that like data, that have data, like we'd love to talk to you to see how we can help our database as we grow it. And as I mentioned, we are on the mission to build the largest open source database in this country. So hopefully it can be a resource to the public in general. And then obviously everybody here, we hope you can utilize it too.